back, listeners, to the BizBlend podcast, the show where strategy meets soul and leadership gets personal. I'm your host, Sana, and today we are diving into the power of narratives. Not just the stories we tell others, but the ones we tell ourselves about our careers, our leadership, and our place in this evolving world of work. And listeners, my guest today is someone who has truly lived across the arcs of influence, from negotiating with Nobel laureates to transforming corporate cultures at Fortune 100 giants like Oracle and Dell. Stephen Sopko has done it all, listeners. Now he's helping professionals design career stories that resonate far beyond a traditional resume. As a co founder of Palisade Compliance and a strategic mind at the Hyperframe Research, Steve brings deep insight into leadership, negotiation, and what it really takes to thrive in this post COVID, AI disrupted landscape. So, whether you are looking to land your next big role or lead with impact, you are in for a powerful 20 minutes here. So, with that, Stephen, welcome to the show, and it is such an honor to have you with us.
Donna, thank you. It's fantastic to be here.
Lovely. I mean, what a journey, what a career, Stephen. So you you have helped countless professionals, build their narrative arcs that position their true value. So before we talk about how to do it or what exactly it is, let's look at some of the common mistakes around this. So what kind of the same you see people make when they try to tell their story, and how do you help them shift it?
That's a terrific question. So I think the biggest mistake that I see people making is they have one story and they tell it over and over and over again. And a lot of
Mhm.
times it's because we're nervous or people have been to a storytelling class. They go to all the work to make a single story, and it's an epic story. It's the equivalent of a Pixar movie or some sort of fairy tale. And when they get interrupted, they don't know how to recover. And so a big part of what I do with my clients is you have to tune the stories you want to tell to your goals, to the audience that you have, and that the environment that you're in. Are you on a long golf afternoon with an executive, or are you in an elevator with that VP you've been trying to meet for months? And really tell the stories differently depending on all of those factors.
Hmm, that makes sense. And and I can relate to this that specifically when we are in tech or consulting or more of a service related role, we kind of tend to lean more on the jargon and the job titles, like chief so and so, senior consulting, and blah, blah, blah. But the real connection, it happens through emotion and clarity. So, how exactly do we find that, Stephen?
Mm. I think you're right. We do get hung up on the lexicon that we have in our profession. The thing that really came home to me was when I exited my startup and I went into the space industry. I went from tech into space, and I was running into these people who are doing amazing, amazing things. Really, they're designing pieces of a lunar probe or space station, and they're talking about it as if they are third year accountants at a horrible firm with a terrible boss. They're not really seeing the excitement in what they're doing. And I thought it was just something about space. But then when I got back into tech as an analyst, I began to realize we are all terrible at seeing the exciting things that we're doing or seeing the value that we're creating and communicating that. And to your point, I think on an emotional level, we need to start by listening to the person that we're talking to. So often in networking events, we think that we are there to say a certain number of words, meet a certain number of people, check a certain number of boxes. But I find, and I've done hundreds and hundreds of networking events, that when I changed my perspective to start listening and asking good questions, that's when things really began to open up for me.
Hmm. Wow. Interesting, Stephen. Interesting. And let's talk about your journey. I mean, I barely scratched the surface in the intro, but you have worked in some really intense environments. I mean, at Dell, Oracle, global sales teams, post Soviet, Eastern Europe. So, how has your definition of leadership evolved through such varied settings? Or rather, let's just frame it. I mean, if you can share a glimpse of that journey, if I mean, yeah, that would be really great.
Well, absolutely. And I think something that really came home to me a few years ago was so much of my career. I started out in the military, and then I went into the oil and gas industry, and then into tech, and then into startups.
Wow.
The consistent theme in leadership through a lot of those experiences was fear, and really having the people who work for you be afraid or be anxious or be concerned. And when I started working, particularly with India, with companies like Dell and Integrion and United Lex, I started working with teams, and I really began to realize fear was just a toxic part of the environment. Everybody's afraid they're going to lose their job. Big companies think we're lucky to have our jobs. And so when I left Oracle, I started with a good friend of mine, a company called Palisade Compliance. And everybody we hired there was a unique expert that nobody else in the world had the knowledge they have. Each person who works for that company has this unique information inside their heads about how Oracle's complex technology and software licensing works together. So fear just couldn't work with them. I couldn't afford to lose a single one of them. And so my toolbox that had fear in it didn't work anymore. And so I think that was about, I think, 2016, 2017. I began to realize that I needed to find other tools like empathy and vision and just all of these different things that I kind of look at fear as a leader a lot like sugar in your diet. You can get a certain amount of buzz out of it, but it's terrible for you in the long run. And I think that was the biggest, I think, evolution for me from the start of my career to where I've come today has been realizing that I needed to just work a little harder as being a leader, and that relying on fear is just kind of like a crutch.
Mm. So is it like more of a selective hiring that you do? That no one else can replace your team members, or is it more like each and every member has a unique set of capabilities and skills to contribute to the success of the company, the longevity and the sustainable abilities of the company?
It's a good perspective. I think Richard Branson says, you take care of your people, the people will take care of your customers. The situation I had at Palisade was somewhat unique because when Craig and I left Oracle, we started
Mhm.
hiring people out of Oracle who had that inside their head real capability. And so they were truly unique. There was nobody else who knew how to do things the way they did. But I think you raise a very good point. I think it's easy to see sometimes when one person has crucial knowledge, but you're right. I think companies are really well run when we look for what each person really contributes to the team and start to see them as maybe not irreplaceable, because a company starts to make weird decisions when we feel like things can't change. But I think
Mhm.
helping people grow towards what they're trying to become is a big part of what I think leadership can be.
Mm. And since you mentioned about fear, I mean, especially post COVID, we have seen this fear. We have seen quiet resignation. We have seen quite firing and mass layoffs. So that fear is kind of traditionally ingrained, especially in the large corporates and conglomerates and MNCs and whatever. But how exactly do you translate this approach of team building in bigger companies right now in today's era?
Well, I think everything starts with trust. And one of the biggest challenges that we have as leaders, especially in big companies, but even in small companies, is we have a limited amount of trust in our bank account with our people. And sometimes our bosses or the human resources department or even IT or our customers burn up that trust for us. We don't have anything to do with it, but suddenly the company has a new policy and everybody on the team really, it takes a hit to the amount of trust they have in the organization and where we're going. And so I think that the antidote to that lack of trust or that burnout of trust is transparency and being really clear about where we're trying to go. And it's interesting. We think about fear as being really an epidemic in large organizations, but some of the most terrifying environments I've ever worked in only had 20 or 30 people in the company. And because it was so small, everything was right at the edge. And so a lot of that negative emotion came up much more quickly. So I think it's not just big organizations, but it's also small ones. But in big organizations, you have a lot of people creating that fear beyond you as the executive or as the manager.
Hmm. Yeah, I absolutely agree with that. Great. Okay. And apart from trust and transparency, you also emphasize on versatility. And you know, there have been so many research papers, and by Harvard Business as well, where uh, people values and processes, if they are in line, then the company or the organization, or even if it's a small company, they are ready for disruption, because we have seen so many uh, you know cases where companies, brands, they kind of failed to embrace the disruption in their respective industries. So in today's era of AI disruption and changing job markets, what skills or mindset shifts do you believe professionals must develop to stay relevant as well as resilient?
See, it's interesting. When earlier in my career, I began to realize that being a negotiator was the job I had, this is years ago, was going to change fundamentally. The age of single professionals doing negotiations was disappearing with work going to various parts of the world, but also parts being automated, that sort of thing. And the thing I began to realize was I had a choice. I could be one of the people who sat still and tried to ignore the change coming or fight the change coming, or I could flip and become part of what was driving the change. So in my particular situation, I went from a big Fortune 100 tech company to an outsourcing company, and really became an expert at taking apart the job I used to do and figuring out what parts could be done from 12 time zones away, what parts of the job could be done by automation at the time. This is pre-AI. I think what's changed in the last few years is the disruption that's coming at us is so hard to predict. When I was doing it a number of years ago, I could see where the change was going to happen. I think the challenge we have with AI is nobody's sure who the buggy whip manufacturers are. When automobiles came about, suddenly you didn't need a whip for your buggy for your horse to make the horse go faster. So it was very obvious that a car was going to do away with buggies, and therefore my job making a buggy whip was going to go away. The challenge with AI is we don't know if AI is going to take manufacturing jobs. Is it going to take legal jobs, finance jobs, sales jobs? We have no idea the impact that's actually going to hit us. So the thing that I'm telling my clients right now is become a user of AI, become a very skilled practitioner at doing your job and playing with the tools that we have, because they're getting better month by month, year by year at an incredible pace. And so the thing that I think people should be considering now, and that I tell my clients now, is being somebody who refuses to engage with AI because it's clunky is very similar to somebody who refused to use a spreadsheet 20 years ago because it was easier to tote up the numbers by hand. And so I think that's kind of where we are right now. So everybody at any stage in their career can be looking at this and thinking, what will this tool let me do better, instead of fearing it?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Wow. And I guess, since you mentioned about embracing this and versatility, again, this kind of blends that, fear of disruption, or fear of kind of getting outdated with the technologies, because this was kind of what we saw when computers got introduced, internet got introduced, um, spreadsheets and Excels and everything, they got introduced. So how exactly a company or an organization as well as an individual can embrace this fear? I mean, any specific practice that you would recommend from a mindset point of view?
Sure, sure. I think being one of the biggest times in my life that I've been afraid is when I only had one thing. I had one job, I had one hobby, I had one thing, and anything that would affect that one thing was devastating because, I had poured everything into that one thing. So the thing that I find, and I tell my kids and I tell my clients and the founders that I'm mentoring through the university, I talk a lot about have multiple challenges, have multiple things going on in your life. If you are running a startup, that's terrific. Join a nonprofit, do mentoring, do something in addition that is in a different direction because it keeps your mind flexible. There's an old expression that when you are close to the horizon, things look very, very big. But then when you
Yeah.
go up 10, 20, 30,000 feet, you begin to get a different perspective and you see things for what they really are. So I think that if there's one thing for people's mindsets that I would really recommend is be multi passionate, have different things that you're excited about so that a setback in any one of them doesn't destroy your whole life.
That is such a useful advice. Such useful advice, Stephen. I think personally, I'm definitely gonna take away this as one of my most important takeaway from this conversation. I encourage all of our listeners to uh, mindfully note this down, and also a bit of a different perspective. So when we talk about personal branding or creating a narrative, there's a school of thought that says constantly adapting can dilute your personal brand, and in many of the interviews which uh, I had given for jobs, because I have kind of a dynamic experience, maybe in specific industry like ed tech and then e-commerce. So I kind of used to get feedback that you don't have deep expertise in a specific industry. So, do you think, I mean, how do you balance versatility with a strong, consistent professional identity in here?
Mm, that is a terrific question. I think that the biggest thing that I tell my clients is to focus on the value you create because you're absolutely right. If somebody's looking for 15 years of experience as a
Mhm.
programmer in a very specific language, that's not the position for me. That's not the position for you. That's there's an old expression, specialization is for ants. But realistically, I'm very connected to aerospace now, and you want people who are very excited about one very narrow thing, and they wanna go very deep in it and be terrific experts, and I trust that person to keep the airplane I'm flying in the sky. So I love people who are that focused and that specialized. There is an alternative, though, to that degree of specialization. If that makes you happy, don't be ashamed of it. You should definitely be doing that because the world relies on people with that expertise. I think when somebody has had, the variety of roles that you've had, that I've had, one of the things we have to pitch, one of the things we have to sell about ourselves is the ability to adapt quickly to change. Because when somebody is very firm and very focused on the only thing they want to do, that's terrific until a shock happens to that. And then like a tree that is very firm, a windstorm comes along and it snaps the tree, whereas a palm tree bends with that wind and can be resilient in the face of change. So I think that in an interview situation, when somebody really wants to push back on you about having had a number of different roles, one of the things it depends on how brave you are. I mean, 'cause, I've actually asked in a job interview, "Okay, I definitely understand that. Are you sure that's the only thing you're gonna need for the next 2 or 3 years?"
Mm.
Because I will promise you that somebody who's on the team who has the history, the background of being able to adapt quickly in the face of change, that
Mhm.
creates a substantial amount of value in and of itself.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Ah, okay, great, great, Stephen. So before we wrap up, um, As you mentor entrepreneurs, you are decoding deep tech trends, you're also guiding career pivots. So, if someone who is listening to our conversation today, right now, is feeling stuck or unseen in their current role, where should exactly they start?
Oh, fantastic. Thank you. So, a way to get a hold of me is through my website, mystage2.com. But the other thing I will tell you is, and this is one of those places that you can use AI. If you are feeling stuck, go to the free interface for whether it's ChatGPT or Claude or Gemini and ask it in the style of an executive coach. Here's my situation. I feel stuck. I feel like I've got these challenges. What are things I could start doing right now today to help myself? And I will tell you, as somebody who went and got certified as an executive coach, you will
Mhm.
get some very powerful mindset advice or challenges from AI that you can start using immediately. So by all means, reach out to me. I'd love to hear from you. The other thing I would say though is this is one of those areas where if you're telling yourself I should really start thinking about using AI, open up the interface and ask it a couple of questions about your current situation and see what it comes up with. I think you'll be surprised.
Absolutely. I did that experiment a few weeks back. I was really, really surprised. I mean, I kind of felt I need not ask anyone. I need not approach anyone. I mean, this is more than enough for me. This can actually kind of accelerate the way I'm introspecting about my next career move or the direction, the trajectory in which I should move further. Yeah, I mean, that's a brilliant, one of the brilliant wonders of using AI. Not AI using you, but you using AI.
Absolutely.
Great, Stephen. So this was such an energizing, wonderful, insightful conversation. I'll make sure to have all the links in the show notes for our listeners. And thank you so much for giving us some of the golden nuggets to take away. Thank you.
And it's been a privilege. Thank you for having me.
So, listeners, if today's episode sparked something within you, take a moment to reflect on your own story. What parts are you highlighting? And what might need a rewrite? And refer to the show notes. Just connect with Steve and also subscribe to BizBlend for more such conversations that blend business strategy with real human insight. Until next time, this is your host, Sana, signing off. Thank you.